Join us on the kayak crew's first paddle on the Tawe River on a 6-mile route from Ynystawe to Swansea on the 8th of September 2020. Watch on to find out about logistics such as parking, public transport, launch and landing locations, what equipment we used, obstacles such as rapids and weirs along the route, and how the route transitioned from the rural scenery of the lower Swansea Valley through the former industrial heartland of Swansea and finally down to the yacht-lined Swansea Marina. We've parked up in this parking area by the bridge at Ynystawe Park, and we're going to find a launch spot now just upstream from the bridge. It's just before 1 o'clock and we managed to find a spot to launch from the bank just above the bridge at Ynystawe Park, so it's 6 miles down to Swansea Marina. I'm from Neath, which is only about 6 miles or so from here, so this paddle on the Tawe River is quite a local paddle for me, but believe it or not, it's my first trip on the Tawe. This big road bridge that we're just going to paddle under carries the M4 motorway over the Tawe River. It's been fairly dry recently, so we were expecting a few shallow and rapidy sections on the river, and it looks like there could be one coming up just ahead of us now. This is the first section of rapids that we come to. Guys fared a lot better than me. I managed to crash into those branches on the left bank and almost broke my left wrist. Got 5 members of the kayak crew out today. Got Di, Ethan and Ewan in the green Pro Aqua inflatable kayaks in the front, Archie behind, and then I'm Carlos. I'm captain, which kind of makes me in charge, although I don't think the rest of the crew would necessarily agree with that. We've had to move over to the left hand side of the river to let this family of swans come through on the right hand side, swimming upstream. Because of the barrage on the river down near its mouth, the Tawe is not tidal, but it's best to check the water levels on the river before you kayak it. We use a website called River Levels UK to check the water levels on the gauging stations before we do any river kayaks. For this stretch of river, the 2 gauging stations were one at Morva and one at Ynystawe. Looks like another section of rapids coming up ahead of us. Hope the guys have remembered their armbands. When you're checking the water levels on the gauging stations, you need to make sure that the levels are comfortably within the green or normal levels on the gauges. By way of illustration, this reading from Ynystawe shows the river being at the lower end of the normal range, so it would probably be a bit shallow in parts on that section. You definitely don't want to go after a lot of rainfall when the level is up near or within the red zone, because the amount of flow could be dangerous then. There are a few weirs on this section of the lower Tawe. We back there past a sort of partial weir, and I think ahead of us there's a couple of full weirs downstream. We're just over 2 miles downstream from Ynystawe, with about 4 miles to go to Swansea Marina. What's surprising is how sort of rural feeling this part of the river is. Even though we're paddling through eastern Swansea, it sort of feels almost like you're paddling on the upper Wye River. This is Archie's maiden voyage in his newly acquired 2-Tager Kinetic 100 Hydrolite sit on top hardshell kayak. We're about 2.5 miles along the route, and we're just coming up to the big 2 weirs downstream. We've stopped here so Di can go and check them out and see whether we're going to go over them or whether we're going to portage around them. Well, we decided to err on the side of caution and carry our kayaks about 50 metres along the riverside cycle track to get around the 2 weirs. Well, it wouldn't be a kayak crew paddle without us having a cider stop and a lunch break. You can see the 2 weirs in the background there. I'm sure that many kayakers will scoff at us for carrying our kayaks around these weirs rather than just paddling over them, but we don't do any sort of whitewater kayaking. We're too cowardly for that. The guys seem to be full of energy after our cider stop, and they've paddled off downstream at a rate of knots. As you can see, when you get downstream of those 2 weirs, which are just over a third of the way along the route, the river becomes sort of deeper and wider, and there's no more sort of rapidy sections. We're about 3 miles along the route now, so roughly halfway to Swansea Marina. We just passed under the Beaufort Bridge, which is a footbridge and a cycle bridge. You can see back there upstream. Over on the right bank, or the west bank there, we're just passing Plasmal. Although because the river has got like parkland fringing it on either side, it still feels very rural. This big bridge that we're just paddling under now carries the main rail line into Swansea. So if you ever get a train into Swansea, then you'll pass over this bridge and can look down on the river shortly before your train pulls into Swansea station. Although Archie's in his hard shell to take a kayak today, we've used almost entirely inflatable kayaks on our trips. We just love the portability of them. You can just deflate them and put them in a backpack and chuck them in the back of a car. Looking back upstream, we just passed the Liberty Stadium, which is the home of Swansea City Football Club and the Ospreys rugby team. We're about 4 miles along the route now, with 2 miles to go to Swansea Marina. On the left there you've got a big residential development called Copper Quarter, which is testimony to Swansea's copper smelting history. Apparently there were so many copper smelting works established in this part of eastern Swansea that for much of the 1800s, Swansea produced more than half of the world's copper, and Swansea earned the nickname Copperopolis. There was a massive regeneration project taken for this area after the decline of the copper industry back in the 20th century, but there are still some remnants of the old industrial buildings on the riverbanks here. We're just passing the Musgrave engine house at Havard Mover Copper Works on the right hand side there. When you paddle the Tawe these days through all of this parkland with tree-lined banks, it's hard to imagine all of the copper works back in the day belching out all of that smoke and fumes. There's a big sort of plume of bubbles and foam there. I guess it's some sort of a pump which is oxygenating the water. Hope Archie doesn't get too close or he might get sucked under. In terms of logistics, we've left a vehicle at either end of the route. At the end, Archie's left his vehicle in the Pain Display car park near the Swansea Yacht Club. If you only had one car, then you could get the X6 Cymru Clipper bus from Swansea back to Ynystawe, or the alternative is of course to get a taxi back to Ynystawe. We're just passing under the main road bridge into Swansea, and interestingly at this point the river has changed its course from the original course that it had back in the medieval period. The original course of the river took it past Swansea Castle. Back in the 1840s, the new cut was dug out, and the original course of the river became the North Dock. This was subsequently filled in, just leaving the new cut as the modern course of the Tawe at this location. The only visible remains of a Swansea Castle today are the two sides of the rectangular southeast corner of the outer bailey. We're just passing Sainsbury's supermarket on the right hand side. Perhaps we'll call in later to do a spot of shopping before we head back. As usual, there's an armada of small boats and yachts moored up on these jetties on the Tawe River as we get near to Swansea Yacht Club. Swansea Yacht Club is open to non-members, and the clubhouse is a great place for having a drink overlooking the river. In the distance on the left hand side you can just about see some of the cranes of Swansea Port. It's quite a big port in Swansea. And over there then on the right hand side, that's looking across towards Swansea Marina. We're going to round these jetties and then turn right and come back upstream a little bit towards the yacht club, where we intend to land on the slipway just above Swansea Yacht Club. Down there those orange barriers mark where the Swansea barrage is, so that's as far as you can go downstream. That's Swansea barrage. Just below those orange barriers there's a lock gate on the right hand side for the yachts and boats to come through. I don't think they'll open the gates to let us through in our kayaks though. It's just gone 5 PM now, and we're going to land over there on that slipway on the left hand side, just next to Swansea Yacht Club. We've really enjoyed our paddle on the Tawe. What a great kayak on an interesting and very underrated river. If you want to download our free PDF guide of this route, which is packed with practical information, then you can do so via our blog post for this trip on our website, which is linked below this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing by clicking on the button on the left below to get updates of our trip reports and product review videos. Happy paddling from the kayak crew.